Right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning to everyone today. My name is Sekar Tingsi, and at today's international seminar, we will be talking of contemporary issues of Southeast Asia in the changing world, energy, transport, and beyond. As our our supervisor today, there's Ms. Rahma Dania, MSE, head of the Department of International Studies. And today, as our speakers, we will be joined by Dr. Ravi Chandran Murthy and Dr. Mikdar Rusdi, Ms. Sek Poor, and Dr. Wahyuni Sagena. Also, as our moderator today, Mr. Randy Werawan and Dr. Phil Iketut, who will join us today to deliver a welcoming speech to our speakers. Before we begin, let's say grace to our Lord or our God or whichever entity we believe in, so that our event today will run smoothly. The time and place is seated. Okay, we'll move on to our agenda today. The first, which was the opening, and the second will be the singing of the national anthem, Indonesia Raya. And the third will be the welcoming speech by our Vice Dean. The fourth will be the photo session. And then we'll move on to the discussion, which will be moderated by Mr. Randy. And then the closing will come back to me. We move on to the next agenda, which is to sing the national anthem, Indonesia Raya. If the operator would please play the national anthem. We move on to our next agenda, which is the welcoming speech by Vice Dean of the Political and Social Sciences of Universitas Mula Warman to Dr. Phil Iketut Gunawan, MA. I give you the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished professor, lecturer, and guests, as well as our beloved student. It is my great pleasure to welcome you in this seminar international entitled Contemporary Issues of Southeast Asia in the Changing World, Energy, Transborder, and Beyond, organized by the Department of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Mula Warman University. I wish to extend my deep appreciation to the Department of International Relations for creatively initiating this academic gathering to discuss contemporary issues in Southeast Asia. I want to particularly thank to the head of the Department of International Relations, Ms. Rahma Dania, in managing this international seminar. On behalf of the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, I would like to say that it is an honor for the faculty with the acceptance of our invitation by distinguished expert Dr. Ravi Chandran Murthy, PhD, Associate Professor University Kebangsaan Malaysia, Dr. Mikdar Rusdi, Assistant Professor University Perguruan Ugama Sri Begawan, Brunei Darussalam, and Ms. Sik for lecturer at Royal University of Phnom Penh, Cambodia. As a resource person in this international seminar. Welcome to our virtual campus and thank you for taking the time to attend this seminar and for your willingness to share knowledge and experiences in this academic gathering. I'm also grateful to Uni Sagena, PhD, a lecturer of the Department of International Relations, for partnering those resource persons in this seminar. Mr. Randy Wirawan, a moderator of the seminar, will lead the discussion. For that, I would like to express my gratitude. My special thanks go to all participants, consisting of expert, lecturer, student, and guests. I'm delighted to welcome all distinguished participants. Ladies and gentlemen, the seminar will shed light contemporary issue in Southeast Asia. And as commonly known, world energy is changing over time, fluctuated. Previously, there was a trend to reduce the use of energy source from unrenewable fossil energy to renewable one. At the very least, many countries have committed to conduct research and stage action aiming at reducing non-renewable energy sources instead increasing the use of renewable energy sources like solar energy, wind power energy, and so on. However, Russia-Ukraine war has undermined such effort, creating the so-called energy shortage or energy crisis, particularly in Europe. Such a war, however, has a global impact, particularly an increased demand in fossil energy. Hence, many developing countries strive to advance such opportunity to increase the production and export of fossil energy, including countries in Southeast Asia like Indonesia. So, the use of world energy turn back to the unrenewable energy sources. This is a challenge, and the topic of the seminar, I think, is definitely relevant. Transborder issues are also changing over time, from transborder migration problem like illegal immigration, illegal entry, to drug trafficking, from drug trafficking to human trafficking, and recently to the spread of the deadly disease like COVID-19. In this changing transborder issue in Southeast Asia, by all means, cooperation is required among countries in this region to establish a better and prosperous Southeast Asia. What are the prominent issues? How to deal with it? The participant will get insight on this related seminar theme. The next question is, what are beyond such issues? We will find the answer in this presentation. and the discussion led by the invited resource person from 4 countries: Malaysia, Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, and of course Indonesia. Distinguished professor, lecturer, and participant, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude my opening remark by encouraging the audience to thoroughly follow the presentation and participation in the discussion session through this digital platform of Zoom for the next 3 hours and so. I wish everyone a successful and fruitful presentation and discussion. Last but not least, hope this academic event is a beginning of further cooperation between universities in these 4 countries. In the future, hopefully, we can extend cooperation in other fields like research, conferences, student exchange, lecturer exchange, and the like. Thank you.
Our next agenda would be a photo session. So if all participants would please turn on their cameras so that we can take screenshots. I would ask again to all participants to turn on their cameras. Thank you. Next, we would ask the Vice Dean, Dr. Phil E. Kutut Gunawan, to symbolically hand over certificates to our speakers today. To Dr. Phil E. Kutut Gunawan, time and place is yours.
Okay, good morning, Professor Dr. Ravi Chandran Murthy. On behalf of the faculty, I would like to hand over the certificate of the seminar, and thank you very much for your participation and attendance. And also, I would like to hand over the certificate to Dr. Mikdar Rusdi, Associate Professor of University Kebangsaan Perguruan Ugama Sri Begawan.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you very much for the sharing of knowledge and experiences.
Okay, you're most welcome. Thank you.
The next one, the certificate will be provided to Ms. Siko, lecturer of Royal University of Phnom Penh, Cambodia. Thank you very much for your admission and consideration in the seminar, and of course in sharing knowledge for information and experiences in this seminar to our students. Maybe the operators should present the first certificate because of the connection problem. The certificate for Dr. Ravi Chandran. Yes, that's it. Professor, this is the certificate presented by the faculty for you, and thank you very much for your attendance and then in sharing knowledge and experiences in this seminar. Thank you.
We'll move on to our main agenda today, which is the discussion of contemporary issues of Southeast Asia in the changing world, energy, transborder, and beyond. I will give the time and place to Mr. Randi Wirawan as our moderator today.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, distinguished speakers. Good morning, Pak Sakut, as Vice Dean, Economic Affairs. To Rahman as Program Study Coordinator, Department of International Relations, University of Mullah Warman. For distinguished speakers, Dr. Uni Sagena, Ms. Sekpor, Dr. Mikdar Rusdi, and Dr. Ravi Chandran Murthy. Good morning. First of all, thank you for joining our virtual seminar today for distinguished speakers and participants. Welcome to Borneo Diplomacy Festival, International Seminar on Contemporary Issues of Southeast Asia in the Changing World, Energy, Transborder, and Beyond. So, ladies and gentlemen and distinguished speakers, today we're going to have a seminar on the topics of, as you see on the poster, contemporary issues on Southeast Asia in the changing world. We will discuss further about the energy security, transborder issues, and any other issues in Southeast Asia, which is very salient today. Pak Ketut has touched in his speech before that the changing international relations or changing international politics, of course, affect the geopolitics, or you name it, like international relations in Southeast Asia. Russo-Ukraine war or a South China Sea and other issues may affect the international relations in Southeast Asia. There are lots of issues that we will discuss, but specifically today and this morning, we will discuss on the basis of energy security, transborder, and beyond, which affect the Southeast Asian countries as a one region in Asia Pacific. So discussion today will be presented by 4 distinguished speakers. Sequentially, first, Dr. Uni Sagena. He's a lecturer in University of Mullah Warman. Second speaker will be Ms. Sekpor, a lecturer at the Institute of International Studies and Public Policy of Royal University of Phnom Penh. Third speaker will be Dr. Mikdar Rusdi from Seri Begawan Religious Teachers University College, and last speaker will be Dr. Ravi Chandran Murthy, Associate Professor in International Relations, Associate Professor in University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Before I continue to the discussion, I would like to sort of give short rules or maybe a short attentions to our speakers. Due to time constraint, each speaker will deliver lecture or speech probably 20 to 25 minutes sequentially. So from Dr. Uni Sagena to last speaker is Dr. Ravi Chandran Murthy. Then we will continue to Q&A or question and answer session, which will be open after for discussions. So for participants, if you have questions, please write down your questions or feel free to type it via chat room. I will read your questions, or maybe on the Q&A sessions later on, perhaps you can ask directly to the speakers. So for the first speakers, Dr. Uni Sagena. I would like to read out to introduce her first before she deliver her topics. Dr. Uni Sagena is a associate professor in the Department of International Relations, University of Mula Warman. She finished her study in UKM, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, on the strategic and international security. She has lots of publication, and one of her newest publication she was an editor on multi-track diplomacy theory and studi kasus. Her research focused on border issues, energy security, and Southeast Asian politics. She is now also holds position on secretary to the University Agency for Research and Community Development. To Dr. Uni Sagena, please welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Wendy Rawan. Good morning, everybody. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah Almighty, the most gracious and the most merciful, distinguished scholars, lecturers, honorable speakers, and our dear students, let me warmly greet you with common Indonesian style. Selamat pagi semuanya, salam sejahtera. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. As a head committee of this international seminar today, and also as part of the speakers, I'm super excited to have here all the participants, especially to the speakers, Dr. Ravi Chandran Murthy. Thank you so much, Dr. Ravi. You will always be one of my favorite teachers. And Dr. Mitra Rusdi, Dr. Sipor, thank you for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge and experiences. I'd like to thank and pay tribute to the committee and for the support from the head of Department of International Relations, Ms. Rahmadania. Can you hear me? Can you hear me clearly, Mr. Randy? Yeah.
Excuse me, Ms. Unis. Your audio is not really transmitting very well, so if you could please do a sound check.
No. What about now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We still cannot hear you properly, Ms. Unis.
Bunis, probably you could raise your voice so we can hear you better here.
What about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's better. I think it's quite clear.
Okay. I was saying that I'd like to thank and pay tribute to the committee and for the support from the head of Department of International Relations, Ms. Rahmadania.
Excuse me, Bunis. I think, do you use another laptops there, or because I hear echo in your microphone? No. I think.
Give me a second.
Probably you could turn off your other device because it's in my laptops. It's echoing.
Okay, what about now?
Yeah, maybe Bu Unis, you could raise a higher voice so we could hear you better here.
Okay,
Thank you, Bu Unis.
okay. By saying that, I'd like to thank and pay tribute to the committee and for the support from the head of the Department of International Relations, Ms. Rahmadania, and also to the Dean, Special Vice Dean of Academic Affairs, Dr. Ketut Gunawan, of Faculty of Political and Social Sciences, Malawarman University, for hosting this international seminar of Southeast Asia Studies. Today, we are here to share about one of the contemporary issues in Southeast Asia, which is energy and the impact. But I'm not alone to talk about it. I proudly announce that I'm together with my team, 6 students from International Relations in Southeast Asia course. This women deserve to be acknowledged with their presence and collaboration as a team. But we try to keep it short, hopefully less than 20 minutes. Here's the title, Energy and Environment Issues in Southeast Asia, the cases of Indonesia, Timor-Leste, and CLM risk countries. CML Guineans, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. What is actually happening in Southeast Asia now? According to IEA, International Energy Agency Outlook 2020, Southeast Asia have developed rapidly over the past 2 decades, and the region is a major engine of global economic growth. And in terms of energy demand, in Southeast Asia, it has increased an average by around 3% a year over the past the 2 past decades, and this trend continued to 2030 under today's policy settings of Southeast Asia countries. And the government across Southeast Asia have faced challenging energy risks, but also have the government also have set out a long-term plan for more secure and sustainable future. Each country has its own pathway, and the range and diversity of the countries and situation in Southeast Asia mean that situation will be a challenge. Therefore, we would like to share our readings and our study about energy issues in 6 countries in Southeast Asia by 6 students of IR department. With us now, there is Sandrina. Sandrina is going to share about energy situation in Timor-Leste. And next, Fikri Ismail is going to share about energy situation in Indonesia. Muhammad Herdi is going to share about energy situation in Cambodia. Jane Aprista about energy situation in Laos. Olivia Putri about energy situation in Myanmar. And the last, Stuart Farwell about energy situation in Vietnam. So that's just an introduction from me. And Sandrina and friends, please continue. The screen is yours. Please unmute. Yes.
Excuse me, Ms. Sandrina, could you please unmute your mic?
Test.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to talk and discuss about energy environment issues in Timor-Leste or East Timor. First, we need to know about East Timor energy resources, which East Timor is the second country that is highly dependent in the world, according to Southeast Asia Globe. On natural oil resources, where oil have existed in Timor-Leste for a very long time, approximately around year 1893, where Portuguese is ruled. There are several oil refinery points in Timor-Leste. There is Laminaria Corallina, located in Bonaparte Basin, Timor Sea, Australia. And then Alangka Katua, located 500 kilometers northwest of Darwin, explored by Australian company ConocoPhillips, producing oil and gas. Bayu Undan, located in 500 kilometers from offshore Darwin, Australia, and is 250 kilometers south of East Timor, producing condensate light oil and liquid petroleum gas. And then Greater Sunrise, located in approximately 450 kilometers northwest of Darwin and 150 kilometers south of Timor-Leste. As you can see from the map I put on the slide, this field with the most oil and gas content in Timor-Leste compared to other fields declared by Antonio de Sousa, the president of East Timor Oil Company, Timor Gap. With Australia's involvement, there are concerns for Timor-Leste as the country most dependent on oil. The presence of abundant natural resources makes oil the main source of the economy of Timor-Leste. And if the oil reserves are slowly exploited and slowly depleted, the economy, precisely Timor-Leste oil income, will experience a very significant decline, according to Charles Siner, a research in Timor-Leste Institute for Development Monitoring and Analysis. Thank you. I would like to yield my time to my friend Fikri for next explanation about energy environment in Indonesia. Fikri, the time is yours.
The next is Indonesia. Indonesia is known for its rich natural resources, which are then used to export to meet the state treasury. In 2021, the most exported commodities are mineral fuels, coal, and oil, with an estimate amount of 45.1 trillion US dollar, which hold 19.8% of total exports. And commodities that are often imported by Indonesia are mineral fuels, including oil. More precisely, refined petroleum and crude oil with a total of 28.8 billion US dollar and fulfill 14.7% of total imports. In fact, Indonesia was a member of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, in 1962. Then in 2008, Indonesia, as the only country from Southeast Asia, announced to leave the oil producer organization. The reason is because Indonesia's crude oil production is in stagnant pace and cannot fill the domestic quota. So that at this time, Indonesia is more focused in being an oil importing country than oil exporter. Therefore, the Indonesian national government has begun to change its energy use towards new and renewable energy, or EBT. Indonesia is known to have all the potential for renewable energy, such as solar, hydro, wind, geothermal, and bioenergy and/or biomass energy. Even Indonesia has set a target of NRE in the national energy mix at least 33% in 2025 and 31% in 2050. An example of an NRE power plant in Indonesia is the construction of wind power plant in South Sulawesi, more precisely in Sidenreng Rapan Regency and Jeneponto Regency. This wind power plant has 30 wind turbines and has a capacity of 75 megawatt. This power plant is located in Matirotasi village area, Watangplo district, with a very strategic position located in mountainous area. Thank you. Next to the next speaker.
Thank you for opportunity. Next slide. Energy situation in Cambodia. Cambodia oil potential has long been explored by the government with several foreign companies. Efforts to find oil exploration begins in 1990s, where the government divided Cambodia territorial water into the six offshores oil blocks for gas and oil exploration, but still did not produce expert results because oil was only found in one block. Then, in 2004, oil the Block A offshore reserve in the Khmer Basin, Gulf of the Thailand was discovered by the Chevron. However, oil the production did not materialize because the government and Chevron had reached profit sharing agreement, causing U.S. oil company to abandon the project and sell to the interest. However, the potential Cambodia natural resource has not been to be able continuous exploration due to the absence of infrastructure, conflict with Thailand, and qualified human resources to do so. Cambodia depends on the movement and effort from the another participant country makes the Cambodia face energy security threat. That's for all Cambodia next to Myanmar.
Okay, thank you. In this part, we will discuss about Myanmar. So Myanmar is one of the oil exporters in Southeast Asia. The country carries over 0.3% of the world's oil reserves and 0.6% of natural gas reserves. Each year, oil becomes Myanmar's main export commodity, taking in 15% of its total exports. And the country that becomes the number one oil export destination of Myanmar is China. Cooperation in the oil trade sector between Myanmar and China has been going on since 2004. And the reason behind this cooperation is that China is a massive industrial country. Therefore, in the country, the need of oil and gas is high as to enhance their industrial process. In the beginning, China had no interest in making Myanmar its business partner. This is because China has already been partnering with Middle Eastern and Central Asian countries, the better known oil producer. However, due to the soaring demand for oil and also the risk involved in the distribution of oil and natural gas, given that it is shipped through the US controlled Malacca Strait, working with Myanmar has to become a consideration for China. The cooperation between both countries in this oil and gas sector intensifies and further strengthened alongside the construction of Sino Pipeline, the oil and gas pipeline. Sino Pipeline was built in 2009 and inaugurated in October 2013. It stretches from the Kyabtu region, Myanmar, to Yunnan, China. The construction of this pipeline is very beneficial for both countries. China is provided with alternative route for transporting oil and natural gas that is more cost and time efficient. And as for Myanmar, in this pipeline construction contract, China agreed to become the permanent and largest buyer of Myanmar's oil and natural gas every single year. In addition, the oil and gas distribution pipeline also increases foreign direct investment or FDI in Myanmar. Despite the fact that both countries are benefited from this pipeline, the existence and operation of the pipeline itself has various risks. In security sector, the presence of militant ethnic groups around the pipeline construction area inside the woods becomes threatening since they're often in an armed conflict. In environmental sector, to begin with, the construction of the pipeline itself had already caused severe irreversible damage to the environment through the destruction of coral reefs, forests, and also mangrove forests. Thus, to deal with the existing risks, greater attention is needed from the Myanmar and Chinese government, as well as the companies that build the pipeline, such as CNBC and MOGE, so that the possibility for risk to further occur is minimized. That's all I can give as the speaker for Myanmar. In the next part, we will discuss about Laos. To Ms. Jane, the mic's on you.
Laos is one of the landlocked countries in Asia and the only one in Southeast Asia. The largest energy source produced by Laos is renewable energy. Laos uses hydropower to generate electricity and has become an important source of income for Laos. Currently, Laos is focusing on developing renewable energy sources, especially generated from nature such as solar, hydro, wind, and biomass power. Therefore, Laos' ambition to become the battery of Southeast Asia raised a lot of controversy. This is due to the many adverse effects of hydropower dams along the Mekong rivers for the people of Laos and other countries. The construction of dams is major threat to the sustainability of the river because the effects on environment can drop in some areas and has the potential to cause regional conflicts for the countries around the Mekong rivers because of its impact on the environment will have a direct impact on the country's economy. Yeah, next to the next speaker, please.
As you can see, Vietnam is one of the main producers of coal and government controls all the coal in Vietnam. And it is with this resource that Vietnam used for domestic power generation and also export it to countries in Asia Pacific region. In 2009, the Global Survey team from US itself estimated that Vietnam could produce 43,715 tons of coal. The Vietnamese government itself plans to exploit about 1,351 square miles of the Red River Delta area, which has large coal reserves in the country of Vietnam. And according to Vietnamese government statistics, coal mining can employ 31% of the workforce in the factory and mining and port sector. Even today, Vietnam home to the third largest coal-fired power plant in the world after China and India.
Okay, I guess that's all for class. And so this international relations in Southeast Asia course. Thank you so much for the students and thank you for listening. And back to the moderator, Mr. Randy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Unisagena, Dr. Unisagena. So first topic discovers that conditions in Southeast Asia in terms of energy security. The speakers at the first session discussed East Timor, about oil in East Timor, renewable energy in Indonesia, Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam, which is we see the overview of energy sort of security or energy availability in Southeast Asian countries, some of Southeast Asian countries. So it's quite interesting to see how Southeast Asian countries struggle with their with their energy security or, excuse me, how they struggle with energy issues domestically and also internationally. I mean internationally like Myanmar. One of the presenters say that Myanmar main partners in oil exporting is China. So they have to manage a good relationship with China and sort of. So thank you, Bu Unis and teams, presenters, students from University of Mulawat. Thank you once again. So we're gonna move to our second speaker, Ms. Sekpor. Excuse me, Ms. Sekpor, are you there?
Yes.
Right. So before I hand over to Ms. Sekpor, I would like to introduce to you, dear participant, our second speaker. Ms. Sekpor is currently a lecturer at the Institute of International Studies and Public Policy of Royal University of Phnom Penh. She is also a young research fellow at Future Forum and a deputy leader of the Young Seekers Cambodia chapter. She holds bachelor degrees. She holds 2 bachelor degrees. First from Royal University of Phnom Penh with major in international relations, and the second one majoring in international business from University of Cambodia. In pursuit of self-development and contribution to society, she is actively involved in volunteering and community works, such as as a volunteer and an intern in various projects and organizations, including USAID, in Cambodia, DIS Project Team, Global Peace Foundation, Sinshu Daily, and other private sectors. So Ms. Sekpor, I would like to pass presentations to you, please. Thank you.
May I ask if it's possible for me to share my own slide so that I can monitor my own slide easier? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so very good morning, everyone, distinguished guests, participants, students, distinguished lecturer, and so on. So first and foremost, thank you so much for having me here. It is indeed a very honor for me to be with the other very experienced distinguished guests today to discuss on the contemporary issue of Southeast Asia in the changing world, focusing on energy, transponders, and issue beyond. So yes, so I would like to thanks to the university as well as Ms. Sagna for connecting me here to be here. So without further ado, I'll just jump start to my presentation. So in this presentation, I'm going to touch upon three main points. Firstly, starting with a very quick overview of Southeast Asia as a region, and then touch upon a few contemporary issues of Southeast Asia. And then I'll focus on two main issues for discussion today, which is energy security in Southeast Asia. And another interesting point to me is the issue of ASEAN relevancy. So I believe when we talk about Southeast Asia, we must understand another important actor, which is ASEAN. So we will touch upon, I will touch upon that topic as well for today's discussion. Okay, so let me start with a very quick overview of the change and the transformation of Southeast Asia as a region over the past half a century, I would say. So first and foremost, undeniably, we have become more significant as a region. And the first major transformation for us is firstly becoming from a colonized country, colonies of the superpower during the 1960s, 1940s, to become an independent and country with enjoying a certain degree of peace and stability, comparing to the periods of Cold War during that times. So that's historical experience of us is actually explain why all Southeast Asia country value so much the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of each of their nation. So that's an interesting point to take note in terms of the patterns of Southeast Asia for sure. Secondly is the transformation from an economics underdeveloped country into an economic powerhouses. So from a war-torn country in Southeast Asia to become a leading economic powerhouse, for example, Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc., was able to achieve significant economic growth throughout the past decades. And not to mention the other architecture and other projects we are currently in. For example, the ASEAN Economic Cooperations, economic integration in the region, and also various free trade agreements with other external partners, such as US, EU, and etc. Not to mention like the proposals for Smart Nation, Industrialized Revolution 4.0, etc. That is a significant illustration of how our region, as our country in the regions have developed so far, economically speaking. Thirdly, from a small country or small power to middle and rising power. Similarly, example, Singapore, Indonesia were able to play a more influential role in the international affair and international relations with their strength in economically, politically, as well as their skillful diplomacy. Just a few quick data. Southeast Asia as a region have the GDP of more than $3 trillion in 2020, and being the third largest economics in Asia and the fifth largest in the world. And GDP expansion, in fact, within just the past 2 decades, the GDP expansion have risen over 450% from the 2000. So we see the rapid economic growth as well in Southeast Asia region as a whole. and population being the very huge markets as a whole, as a region, when we consider not just a nation, but as a region. And for sure, the very successful architecture, which is ASEAN itself. So that would be a very quick point out to the transformation of Southeast Asia region. So despite all this positive change, we as a region also still facing a pressing and very complicated issue, including South China Sea, the threat in not just Southeast Asia country, but also other superpower such as China and US, and various other transboundary issues such as environmental corrosions, the hot issue of Myanmar crisis, Rohingya crisis, and so on. That's no longer just a domestic issue because of its impacts on, for example, the flow of refugees to other countries, the instability in the region as a whole, and even the unity of the ASEAN, and so on. So there's a lot of problem and issue that we have to address, that the government have to address. Other than that, include the COVID-19, the pandemics that we all know affects our life in various aspects. I would say in all aspects in our life. In a ways, we have to rapidly flexible and be able to change to adapt with the situation that is arising. Other than that, food security, energy security, and especially how a Southeast Asia country is able to maneuver or work around the superpower mentioned previously, I will touch upon only two main topics: the energy security in Southeast Asia and looking at the discussion of ASEAN relevancy. Okay, so for energy security, when we talk about energy security, though there are various different focus and interpretations or definition, but mainly we are referring to the availability of the access to reliable and adequate energy supplies at an affordable price. While this is from the perspective of more importers, if we're looking at the exporter perspective, it can also be focusing on the security of having more energy demand so that they can export more energy or natural resources for energy. But mostly in Southeast Asia, as in previous presentation have also touched upon, we are more of a importing country for Southeast Asia region. So that's we'll focus on that. So when we look at energy security, we can also focus on two main aspects. There's a lot of aspects, but two main things is robustness and resilience. So robustness basically refer to the sufficient of resources, whether it is enough oil, enough coal, gas, or renewable energy for the country or the regions to consume based on their demands, or to simply put whether there is a stable supplies of energy or not. And second terms, resilient, being the ability to withstand disruption or bounce back or recover after disruption supplies and energy, for example. So that would be the two main aspects then that we will try to examine and look at whenever we try to understand the energy security in a country or in a region. Just a few data that I think we are all to know so that we can try to understand the patterns of energy security in Southeast Asia. So according to ASEAN Centers for Energy, ASEAN Energy Outlooks Report 2022, ASEAN member states, which is 10 Southeast Asia countries, energy demands reach around 429 millions of tons of oil equivalents, which is around 28.4 increase compared to 2010. So we can see that the energy demands have increased in response to the economic growth of the regions. Despite the various degree of economic growth of each country in Southeast Asia, all countries or almost all countries have doubled their economic size since 2000 basically. And according to the International Energy Agency, which is also a report that a previous presentation have touched upon, to reiterate, emphasize that again, based on the International Energy Agency, Southeast Asia Energy Outlook 2022, energy demands of Southeast Asia have increased by around 3% a year for the past 2 decades. So basically since 2000. So a trend is expected to continue to 2030, just like previous presentation have touched upon as well. Okay, so now let's look at another graph to understand what type of fuel we're using in most of our region. So as you can notice in the graph, besides the light green and the green portions, which is considered renewable energy, a large portion of energy supplies for Southeast Asia region is from fossil fuel. That include coal, natural gas, oil, oil, and so on. And in fact, even though renewable energy have been increasing, but we see the energy demands mostly from the fossil fuels instead. So considering in terms of growth in the energy demands, 90% of which are still from fossil fuel. So specifically, coal is the top energy source for Southeast Asia, which have increased in demands by 6 times within just 2 decades ago. And oil increased by 40%, and natural resources increased by 80%. So, so what does this trend, this overall data tell us? Firstly, even though there will be 3/4 of increase in energy demand in 2030, most of which are fossil fuel, that would also means there will be a near increase of 35% increase in carbon emissions, meaning that our regions is still largely depending on fossil fuel, just like Vice Deans have just mentioned in the opening remark. Though there has been a commitment to produce more natural resources, but based on the data, the actual data saying we're still largely depending on fossil fuel. And if no major action taken or changes, it's going to remain so until 10 or 20 years next. And given the carbon emissions levels that's producing by fossil fuel, it is a major concern for all Southeast Asia country government to take action in order to transition from non-renewable energy to renewable energy in order to meet their commitments of reducing carbon emission in the regions. So that's a concern that we see from the data, the actual data. Looking at the energy supply, in 2020, the region import around 2.6 million barrels per day of oil, mainly from Middle East and Africa. So oil import continue to rise is expected to continue to rise in the next 10 or 20 years for example, to around 4.6 billion barrels per day in 2030 to 6.2 billion barrels per day in 2050. Another concern that we all aware of, which is Russia invasion of Ukraine or Ukraine war in February 2022, have been a wake-up call for all countries in terms of the fluctuations of the oil price in the world. It have actually impacts the confidence of people or country in building infrastructures for oil, as well as the affordabilities of price in oil. So that's another concern. Previously, we talked about the concerns in the over dependencies on non-renewable energy. And second, we have looked at or we have implied from data is vulnerability or very flexible fluctuated price of those non-renewable energy source. That's also another concern that government have to take care of. And touch upon briefly overall energy access. According to the same report, IEA report, energy access have been able to improve in Southeast Asia in the recent year. Around 95% of households today have electricity, and 70% have clean cooking solutions such as liquefied petroleum gas and improved cook stove. However, it's not applied to all countries. In Cambodia and Myanmar, for example, there is still challenges, especially for those people in the rural area that is not connected or well connected infrastructure to the city. And in terms of universal access to electricity, it is expected or estimated that it can achieve in around 2030. But even by 2050, there's still more people not able to have access to clean cooking. So energy access is also an issue to address in order to achieve the well-being of the people in Southeast Asia, especially those in rural area. So besides what is mentioned earlier, we can also notice a few challenges in energy sector in Southeast Asia. Firstly is the increase in price in energy can impact not just the price of oils, but also the economic well-being or structures of the country as a whole. So for example, like countries like Vietnam, Thailand have been very competitive in attracting foreign direct investments due to their cheap electricity price. And of course, other factors such as foreign free trade agreement that they have in other regions. Yet, if the price of electricity skyrocketed, it also means that there is the loss of the competitiveness of Southeast Asia country in attracting the foreign direct investment, which is the key to the economic growth of the country. Secondly, we have also just suffered the severe impacts of pandemics and over the past 2 years, I would say. And for now, we are considered each country in the region is focusing more on post-pandemic economic recovery plan. And on a national levels, country economic development plan and framework to address or recover the country have been hindered by the skyrocketed price of the oils due to the crisis in Ukraine, for example. And on the individual levels, peoples are especially those vulnerable groups who hardly recover from the income loss during pandemics is also suffering a lot with the further skyrocketed of the price in commodities and also living costs. Another issue facing in terms of sustainability of energy use is the environmental impacts of the increasing energy consumption based on fossil fuel that we mentioned earlier. So for the way forward, there are many ways forward, but I would like to touch upon 3 things. Firstly, in the short run, government intervention is very necessary in addressing the challenges that is faced by the people in the region. For example, in Cambodia, as an example, even the situation of pandemic is easing, the program of cash transfer continue to process targetedly for the group of people who are at risk or are vulnerable, suffering the poverty in order to help with their livings with the impacts of the increasing in price of living. And second, besides that, in long terms, the diversification of energy source as well as investment in energy transition, or simply put, investment in clean energy technology, including the renewable energy production, as well as efficient energy use are the way forward for the government to think of. So Southeast Asia need to attract more investment in terms of clean energy. Okay, due to the time constraint, I will just go quicker for the last part, which is in terms of ASEAN relevancy. So as I mentioned previously as well, we cannot study Southeast Asia without or ignoring ASEAN. So ASEAN has existing for over half a century. But if we look back to when ASEAN was established, it was not expected that it could last that long, given the previous experience of various organizations such as Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, ASA or Mafinando, that didn't really last that long. Just like what people would discuss about the UN, there is also many discussion in terms of ASEAN, whether ASEAN is still relevant in today's world. So I have to admit that ASEAN have been facing a lot of challenges in the recent changing world. First and foremost is the opponents of ASEAN questions the ability of ASEAN in addressing the current issue, hot issue in the regions. So first, for example, South China Sea and the Myanmar issue, for instance. So being the regional organization, ASEAN have all the attentions from the both internal and external actor to whether ASEAN can take care on the issue in the regions. So for instance, the little progress of the formation of Code of Conducts or COC for South China Sea has been the point of condemnations or the view of the opponents of ASEAN that ASEAN is no longer relevant. Second is the different interests and diversiveness in the regions and inability of ASEAN to pull together all these different interests. So it's not a surprise that ASEAN or Southeast Asia region as a whole is largely diverse politically, economically, and socially, we would say. Given to these differences, they also have different national interests. So despite the overall common goals of peaceful and stable regions, the actual national, there are still differences in terms of national interest, as well as ways to deal with issue. So taking South China Sea dispute, for example, again, there's different levels of concern or focus on this issue by different Southeast Asia countries. For example, there are climate country and then there are non-climate country. So it's easy to understand that climate country focus more or expect more action to be taken in South China Sea dispute. But not just different between non-climate and climate states, but even the climate state themselves have different degree of focus or concerns over the issue. For instance, according to the institutions of Southeast Asia study, Yusof Ishak Institute States Southeast Asia survey in 2020, most people in Vietnam and the Philippines view that South China Sea dispute as the predominant security concern for them. So more than 80% of the people voted that as the top priority or top security concern they are facing. While Brunei, for example, for concerns more on economic downturns, potential economic downturns, as well as economic aspects, while Indonesia and Malaysia focus more on their domestic aspects based on the survey. So we can see that there is a difference in the levels or the attention of concerns on dealing with all those issues. So we have to admit that ASEAN is facing that challenge in pulling all these different levels of concern to deal with this issue. Thirdly, ASEAN is also facing the challenges in terms of its fundamental principle of ASEAN Way. So we all know ASEAN Ways includes the consensus decision-making and respect for sovereignties and sovereignty and non-interference. So these principles make it very hard for the organization to deal with the issues such as Myanmar crisis, because we requires the approvals or the permission from the local government to actually take action. So we can see that there are a lot of challenges that ASEAN is facing. But back to the questions, does these challenges that ASEAN is facing makes ASEAN irrelevant nowadays? My answer is not really. And because firstly, like any organizations, even the more institutionalized organizations like UN or EU are facing problems that they cannot technically solve, just like ASEAN. Yet we can say is that ASEAN's, UN, and EU are still playing important roles in their scope of work. ASEAN, for example, are still able to make progress in terms of economics, in terms of social, addressing a lot of cross-boundary issues that it cannot be solved based on each country alone. Secondly, ASEAN centrality still play a role in regional affairs, as we can see. So there is an interesting discussion in terms of view on the defining of ASEAN centrality. So being the external partner, focusing more on the outcomes of ASEAN in solving the issue, whilst internal country or the ASEAN member state focusing ASEAN centrality or define ASEAN centrality as the continued engagement in solving the issue in the region. So we can see that putting the level of effectiveness aside in solving various issues, ASEAN is still play an important critical role as the main actor in solving the issue in the regions. So meaning that when external partner comes to involve or engage in regional issue of Southeast Asia, they still go through ASEAN in that sense. Thirdly and lastly, something that people might overlook in the fact that even though ASEAN way seems to have its weaknesses based on Western standard, we can say that possibly ASEAN way is the only possible method to bring Southeast Asia country together in the first place. As I mentioned earlier, ASEAN or Southeast Asia country historical experience has been being colonized by other countries. So it's unlikely that each country would be willing to compromise on their sovereignty or control over the issue. So the ASEAN way is possibly the only ways or only principles that are able to bring all Southeast Asia countries together on a frequent basis. So a big arrangement is much better than non-arrangement at all, right? So a quick conclusion. I'm a bit running short of times. So just a quick conclusions. We can see that as a regions, we are facing a lot of issues. And regional cooperation is the key to addressing all those challenges in the first place. A lot of issues are no longer within one boundary, but cross-border and trans-borders, meaning only regional cooperation can be through ASEAN that can address all those issues. Another point is the diversification is the way forward to strengthen resilience in the region, both in terms of economics as well as energy supplies and various other issues. Diversification allows countries or other regions to have more options to deal with the issue, more choice to deal with the issue. And other points being, the regions have to be prepared for the non-traditional challenges that is going to happen ahead of time. Things or the worlds are changing, and there will be more non-traditional challenges happen. And last but not least, green growth and sustainable developments are the future trends that Southeast Asia countries have to focus on for sustainable futures of the regions. So that would be the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Sekpor. So very interesting presentation from Ms. Sekpor, beginning from the transformation of Southeast Asia, where independence was the very essential factors in Southeast Asian countries. Most of Southeast Asian countries, I think, except Thailand. Then that transformation begins to develop and sort of like in Ms. Sekpor conclusion, sort of like hinders the unification of ASEAN or Southeast Asian countries. Unlike European Union, which integration and unification was very possible. I also think the same way, like as Ms. Sekpor, like in ASEAN, it is quite harder to achieve integrity. So the only way we could achieve is through ASEAN way, what's so-called as ASEAN way. So it's quite interesting and how our energy security develops. Like we have availability of resources, but then it doesn't necessarily means that those resources are robust, and with those resources, we are quite resilient to face against energy security threats. Fossil fuel still dominates the energy consumption or energy demand in Southeast Asia. Issues like pandemics, Russia-Ukraine war, South China Sea also hinders the development of finding a renewable energy or other source of energy resources. Ms. Sekpor give us three solutions at least. I noticed first is the government intervention, like the government must be very serious to change the habits of energy consumption. Then the second one is the diversification of energy itself. Then the last one is the investment of energy. So thank you, Ms. Sekpor, for your presentations. We're gonna move to the third presenters. The third presenters is Dr. Mikdar Rusdi. Excuse me, Dr. Mikdar Rusdi, are you? All right, okay. So I'm gonna introduce Dr. Mikdar Rusdi. He is an associate professor in Seri Begawan Religious Teachers University College. He was educated from University Kebangsaan Malaysia in Malaysia. He was also a lecturer in University Tun Hussein on Malaysia until 2017. He was a dean on the faculty of Usuluddin in Seri Begawan Religious Teachers University College until 2021. He also has published 13 books and many other publications, which I cannot mention one by one. So, Mr. Mikdar Rusdi, presentation. So, time is yours. Please welcome Mr. Mikdar Rusdi. Thank you.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much for fellow moderator. First of all, I'd like to thank University Ummul Warman for inviting me to join this beautiful seminar. Also the organizing committee and all students from International Relations. The Honorable Vice Dean of Faculty Social and Political Science, University Ulama Marwan Indonesia, the Honorable Speaker, my fellow friend, Dr. Uni Sagena, ini teman seperjuangan saya di Malaysia, Ms. Sikfor, and PM Dr. Rafi Chandran Murti. Ladies and gentlemen, because I saw the most of the participants to join this seminar are Indonesian, I think I rather to speak Malay, in order to more fluencies in understanding each other. Okay, judul yang saya coba kongsikan kepada tuan-tuan semuanya sedikit sebanyak tentang Brunei Darussalam dari sudut pandang agama dan lingkungan. Sudah diketahui bahwa Brunei Darussalam adalah salah satu dari negara anggota di Asia Tenggara, salah satu negara yang dekat dengan Indonesia dan merupakan satu pulau dengan Universitas Ulawarman. Dan perlu juga kita ketahui bahwa universitas yang saya tempati bekerja di Brunei itu ada kaitan dengan Universitas Ulawarman dalam konteks KAIB yang setiap tahunnya akan bertukar-tukar tempatnya lah, termasuk untuk tahun depan akan dilakukan di Universitas Ulawarman insyaallah. Okay, next please. Excuse me, can I take control of the slide, please? Okay. Oleh kerana student-student yang join dengan seminar ini adalah student antarabangsa, student internasional, mungkin agak bagus kalau saya coba untuk mengungsikan satu ayat dalam Al-Quran agar hubungan internasional ini agak semakin memberi manfaat untuk semua. Firman Allah dalam surah Al-Hujurat ayat 31, ya ayyuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dzakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum syu'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum innallaha alimun khabir. Terjemahannya, wahai sekalian manusia, sesungguhnya kami telah menciptakan kamu dari lelaki dan perempuan dan kami telah menjadikan kamu berbangsa-bangsa dan bersuku-suku. Tujuannya adalah untuk lita'arafu, saling kenal mengenal. Dan sesungguhnya hasil daripada saling kenal mengenal itu akan menghasilkan suatu ketakwaan yang mulia di sisi Allah. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Sesungguhnya manusia yang paling mulia di sisi Allah adalah orang yang bertakwa. Okay, dalam ayat ini ada dua poin penting yang menarik, bahawa sudah menjadi sunnatullah, kita ini berbeda. Sudah menjadi sunnatullah ini adalah banyak bangsa-bangsa. Di Asia Tenggara sini saja Masya Allah, luar biasa. Different budaya, different culture, different bahasa, dan semuanya itu memberikan suatu khasanah keilmuan yang membuatkan kita ini Asia Tenggara kaya dengan budaya. Kemudian, tapi kita jangan lupa sebagai bangsa yang beragama, seperti agama Islam, kita ini dituntut untuk saling menghormati, saling memuliakan, saling menjadikan pengetahuan bangsa-bangsa yang ada di luar sana itu sebagai platform bagi kita untuk mengenal kesejahteraan umat lebih jauh. Okay, next please. Kalau kita melihat Brunei Darussalam, seperti yang kelihatan dalam slide, negara Brunei Darussalam ini terletak di bahagian utara Pulau Kalimantan dan terdiri dari 4 provinsi. Ada namanya Provinsi Temburong, ada namanya Brunei Muara, ada Tutong dan ada Blaik. Dari segi keluasan, negara Brunei Darussalam ini adalah merupakan negara yang kedua terkecil di Asia Tenggara setelah Singapura. Jadi luasnya lebih kurang 5.765 km persegi dan penduduknya belum sampai setengah juta. Hanya 449.182 penduduk negara Brunei Darussalam. Ini sangat kecil kalau dibandingkan dengan Indonesia, mungkin ini hanya seluas satu kabupaten. Kalau kita misalnya lihat Singapura, penduduknya padat juga di sana, tapi luasannya masih besar Brunei Darussalam. Negara Brunei ini lahir dan merdeka pada tahun 1 Januari 1984. Ini lebih kurang 38 tahun yang lalu. Negara ini baru merdeka. Dan satu uniknya dengan Brunei ini, salah satu negara yang ada tulisan Arab di benderanya. Di benderanya yang kita kenali yang ada tulisan Arab, Arab Saudi, kemudian Irak, dan termasuk Brunei Darussalam. Apa yang menarik dari tulisan Arab ini? Di situ ada tulisannya Ad-Daimun al-Muhsinuna bil Huda Brunei Darussalam. Ad-Daimuna itu adalah suatu simbol atau slogan yang menghendaki rakyatnya untuk sentiasa ad-daimun, berkomitmen dengan kebenaran, berkomitmen dengan agama, berkomitmen dengan bangsa. Al-Muhsinun sentiasa menjadikan dirinya adalah orang yang menjadi contoh kebaikan kepada orang lain. Bil Huda itu salah satu nama dari Al-Quran yang menjadikan Al-Quran itu sebagai rujukan utama dalam bersikap dan berinteraksi. Perlu juga diketahui bahwa negara Brunei Darussalam ini dikenal dengan negara Islam, negara Islam yang sudah mengisytiharkan dirinya negara Islam dan mempunyai slogan apa yang kita sebut dengan MIB. Nanti kita jelaskan yang itu. Okay, next please. Okay, kalau kita melihat negara Brunei secara keseluruhan, dari konteks agama, memang kita sudah mengenali, sudah mengisytiharkan negara Islam sejak tahun 2013 dan berkuat kuasa bermula dari 1 hari bulan Mei 2014. Itu belum lama lagi pengisytiharannya kepada negara Islam. Justru itu negara ini disebut juga dengan negara zikir sebab institusi, kemudian masyarakat, semua mengabadikan tradisi-tradisi zikir itu di seluruh lapisan masyarakatnya. Sampai kepada apa yang disebut dengan pembentukan satu undang-undang pembelajaran agama, itu wajib dilaksanakan di Brunei Darussalam bermula dari sekolah SD, sekolah rendah. Itu wajib pendidikan agama. Siapa yang tidak memasukkan sekolah agama kepada anak-anaknya, maka bisa dikenakan satu undang-undang. Itu yang terjadi di Brunei Darussalam. Kemudian dari segi bahasa, Brunei menggunakan bahasa Melayu seperti Malaysia, seperti Indonesia. Kemudian bahasa yang kedua adalah bahasa Inggeris. Dan uniknya di negara Brunei Darussalam ini, bahasa Inggris itu menjadi bahasa yang sangat utama juga selain bahasa Brunei. Bahkan peringkat sekolah rendah, sekolah menengah dan peringkat universiti yang mengajar bahasa Inggris memang kerajaan Brunei meng-hire atau menggaji khusus pensyarah-pensyarah atau dosen atau guru yang datang dari negara Inggris, dari Inggris Amerika kah, atau Inggris British atau Inggris Australia. Itu semua didatangkan untuk memperbaiki bahasa Inggris yang ada di Brunei. Kemudian dari segi tulisan, tulisan ini unik sedikit karena tulisan di Brunei ini bermula kita melihat dari signboardnya itu selalu disertakan tulisan Jawi. Tulisan Jawi, selalu Jawi yang paling di atas. Jawi di sini maksudnya adalah tulisannya berbahasa Arab, tetapi bacaannya berbahasa Melayu. Seperti yang kita nampak dalam gambar departure, itu setelahnya itu pelepasan. Macam waving gallery, shop and toilet, itu ruang lembaian, kedai, tandas. Itu semua adalah tulisan-tulisan yang sudah dijadikan sebagai undang-undang dalam negara Brunei Darussalam. Kita tidak bisa mendirikan suatu toko kecuali ada tulisan Jawinya di situ. Kemudian dari segi penghasilan negara, ini mungkin ada kaitannya dengan seminar kita. Dari segi energi, dari segi apa dan sebagainya, Brunei Darussalam mainly income dia itu bersumber dari minyak bumi atau oil and gas. Ada lebih kurang 92% atau 92% pendapatan penghasilan negara itu semua bersumber dari minyak dan gas. Dan itu memang saya kira di Asia Tenggara ini, di Brunei saja yang paling murah petrolnya di antara negara-negara lain. Kemudian di Brunei juga ada pertanian, ada sawah di sini tapi tidak terlalu banyak, perkebunan juga ada, tapi mayoritas atau majoriti di Brunei ini hutan rainforest atau hutan alami yang begitu masih belum disentuh. Ini lebih kurang dalam 70 atau 80% kawasan di negara Brunei Darussalam itu masih dipenuhi dengan hutan. Jadi kalau ada sahabat-sahabat yang datang ke Brunei pasti akan melihat banyak hutan. Kecuali di Bandar Seri Begawan lah di kotanya. Kemudian pariwisata juga salah satu bentuk penghasilan, tapi ini tidak memberi kesan yang signifikan kepada penghasilan negara. Next please. Kemudian dari pegangan agama dan falsafah, negara Brunei Darussalam memberikan suatu piawaian atau satu aturan bahwa semua amalan keagamaan di Brunei Darussalam, terutama sekali agama Islam, harus berpandukan kepada satu mazhab yang disebut dengan mazhab akidah Ahli Sunnah wal Jamaah atau pegangan Ahli Sunnah wal Jamaah. Kemudian mazhabnya mesti bermazhab Imam Syafi'i. Ini sudah diwartakan dalam undang-undang kerajaan dan sudah dititahkan oleh Kebawah Duli Yang Maha Mulia Paduka Sri Baginda Sultan Haji Hasan Al-Bolkiah. Foto yang di sebelah kiri itu adalah foto saya bersama dengan Sultan Hasan Al-Bolkiah pada masa convocation tahun 2019 yang lalu. Oke, ada satu yang menarik. Sebagai falsafah negara Brunei Darussalam yang diperkenalkan sejak merdeka 1 Januari 1984, apa yang disebut dengan Melayu Islam Beraja. Melayu Islam Beraja ini adalah satu falsafah negara yang menekankan 3 dimensi utama. Melayu sebagai bangsa, Islam sebagai agama, Beraja sebagai sistem pemerintahan. Jadi ketiga ini dibuat satu acuan sebagai falsafah negara, sebagai ideologi negara. Kalau di Malaysia ada istilah rukun negara, Kalau di Indonesia ada istilah Pancasila, kalau di Brunei Darussalam ada istilah Melayu Islam Beraja atau yang disingkat dengan MID. Dan justru pegangan inilah yang menjadi platform kepada satu ayat Al-Quran. Dalam Al-Quran dan surah Al-A'raf ayat 96. Dengan mengatakan walau anna ahlal qura amanu wattaqau la fatahna alaihim barakatin minas sama'i wal ard walakin kadzabu fa akhadna bima kanu yaksibun. Sekiranya penduduk suatu negeri beriman dan bertakwa, niscaya kami akan bukakan pintu keberkatan dari langit dan juga di bumi. Walakin kadzabu fa akhadnahum bima kanu yaksibun, tetapi mereka itu mendustakan Allah, maka kami beri siksaan kepada mereka terhadap apa yang mereka telah lakukan. Okay, ayat ini salah satu menjadi pegangan sebab kita tahu Brunei adalah negara yang sudah mengisytiharkan dirinya sebagai negara Islam. Sudah tentu semua ayat-ayat Al-Quran menjadi rujukan utama dalam membina suatu falsafah termasuk MIB tadi itu. Okay. Okay, next please. Okay, dari satu sisi menarik juga untuk Brunei, mata uangnya ini ada dua namanya, terkadang dipanggil dolar Brunei, kemudian terkadang dipanggil juga dengan ringgit Brunei. Dua-duanya dapat kita sebutkan begitu. Nilainya lebih kurang macam dolar Singapura. Jadi satu dolar Singapura, satu ringgit Brunei itu sama nilai tukarannya. Kemudian dari segi perancangan pembangunan, kalau di Indonesia dulu ada istilahnya GBHN pada zaman pemerintahan Soeharto. Kalau di Malaysia ada namanya Wawasan 2030. Kalau di Brunei ada Wawasan 2035. Ini adalah proses perancangan negara setiap 5 tahun untuk sampai ke sana untuk menjadikan negara ini sebagai negara yang dapat bersaing di peringkat global dan antarabangsa. Kemudian dari segi etnik, di sini etnik banyak juga, tapi ini mungkin etnik yang banyak didominasi di Pulau Kalimantan bahagian utara. Etnik Melayu, etnik Cina, Kadasan, Iban, Muru, Kedayan dan Dusun. Itu semua adalah etnik-etnik yang ada di Brunei Darussalam, tapi majoriti adalah etnik Melayu. Next please. Okay, dari segi lingkungan hidup, dari segi alam sekitar, perlu kita ketahui bahawa salah satu negara yang sudah menandatangani Perjanjian Paris berkaitan dengan penjagaan perubahan iklim dengan suhu global yang sentiasa meningkat pada abad ini. Negara Brunei Darussalam adalah salah satu negara yang berkomitmen untuk menjaga itu semua. Justru itu, negara Brunei Darussalam masih dikategorikan sebagai negara yang boleh dikatakan dua terbersih di dunia udaranya. Atmosferanya Masya Allah sangat cantik. Kemudian tanahnya, haiwan dan tumbuh-tumbuhannya masih terjaga dengan baik sebab masih hidup dalam lingkungan habitatnya, termasuk tumbuh-tumbuhan, hutannya, kemudian air, bunyi dan suara pun di sini di Brunei Darussalam boleh dikatakan kita masih menjaga. Jarang kita mendengarkan ada suara-suara kebisingan, kemudian kemacetan di jalan raya pun masih kurang berbanding dengan Jakarta dan Kuala Lumpur. Kita masih kalau pulang ke rumah dari kantor misalnya dari office, mungkin masih dapat 10 menit, 15 menit sudah sampai di rumah dari kantor kita. Ini menunjukkan masih terjaga dan itu saya kira negara Brunei Darussalam masih memplanningkan untuk sentiasa menjaga kestabilan dan keharmonian itu. Okay, next please. Sebagai kesimpulan, kita ketahui bahawa negara Brunei Darussalam adalah negara pertama di Asia Tenggara yang mengisytiharkan diri sebagai negara Islam. Dan sudah tentu ini boleh kita jadikan sebagai mungkin contoh kerana salah satu di antara negara Asia ini yang tiada utang luar negeri Brunei Darussalam. Jadi justru itu mata uangnya stabil terus. Kemudian falsafah negara Brunei Darussalam adalah MID yang mencerminkan 3 dimensi utama, yaitu Melayu sebagai bangsa, Islam sebagai agama, beraja sebagai sistem pemerintahan. Dalam konteks hubungan antara bangsa, Brunei Darussalam sentiasa memainkan peranan yang proaktif kepada semua. Justru itu setiap delegasi dari luar negeri, Masya Allah, memang luar biasa. Baru-baru ini Presiden atau Kambodia datang ke Brunei, sangat disambut dengan meriah. Bahkan bendera-bendera Kambodia itu sudah dipasang di sepanjang jalan sebelum sampai kepada Istana Nurul Iman di Bandar Seri Begawan. Kemudian Brunei Darussalam dalam konteks pemikiran keberagamaan itu berdasarkan kepada titah-titah ke bawah dulu yang maha mulia, yaitu Sultan Brunei Darussalam. Dan apapun amalan kerajaan harus berpandukan kepada titah tersebut. Dan antara satu titahnya yang berkaitan dengan pengamalan agama, yaitu mentitahkan aliran atau hanya aliran Ahlussunnah wal Jamaah dan mazhab Imam Syafi'i saja yang bisa diamalkan di Brunei. Brunei boleh dikatakan negara yang masih sangat selamat, selesah untuk ditempati tinggal karena alam sekitarnya masih terjaga dengan baik, jauh dari pencemaran, jauh dari kebisingan, jauh dari pabrik-pabrik atau kilang-kilang yang merusak ekosistem alam sekitar. Oke, saya kira cukup sekian dan terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Dr. Mikdar Rusdi. His presentations focusing on Brunei Darussalam. At the beginning, he introduced Brunei Darussalam in many Brunei Darussalam profile in many ways, like its economics, its demography, cultures, politics, and also Islamic states. Dr. Mikdar Rusdi said that Brunei Darussalam is the first Southeast Asian country declaring that Islamic as the foundation of the state. So he also elaborate what factors underlies Islamic State in Brunei, like Imam Syafi'i as the mazhab, the legal mazhab of the government, Islam as the religion, and etc. And also he closed the presentation with the sort of like overview about the environment in Brunei Darussalam. Well, I had a friend from Brunei as well, Dr. Mikdar, when I was in Australia, studying in Australia. He also mentioned that Brunei Darussalam is a very quiet, he would say city. Bandar Seri Begawan is a very quiet city. No, he said no macet there, no traffics, unlike a Jakarta or many capitals in Southeast Asia, probably Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and others. So I just imagine how genuine the environment in Brunei Darussalam. So thank you, Ms. Dr. Mikdar Rusdi, for your presentation. So we're moving to the last presenter, Dr. Rafi Chandran. All right. So Dr. Rafi Chandran I would introduce him first to you, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Rafi Chandran Murthy is the Associate Professor in International Relations and Strategic Studies Program, Research Center for History, Politics, and International Affairs, University Kebangsaan Malaysia. He's a head of the postgraduate program at the Research Center for History, Politics, and International Affairs at the University Kebangsaan Malaysia. He teaches and conduct researches in international relations, security studies, and bioethics. Very interesting how we develop bioethics in international relations, in international security, with special focus on ASEAN and South Asian affairs. I read his CV and try to find out his publications. Dr. Ravichandran Murthy publication is very immersive. I couldn't mention one by one. So he has over 100 academic publications, including pre-edited volume. I think the very recent is the Emerging Dynamics in Contemporary Malaysia-India Relations, which will be published at the end of 2022. Yeah, Dr. Ravichandran. So please welcome Dr. Ravichandran for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, it's very clear.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, for the introduction. On the outset, please allow me to thank Dr. Uni Wahyuni Segana, who I've been associated with for many years, for this invitation, and also to the office bearers of University Mullah Warman for the invitation. And my greetings also to my panel speakers, those three speakers who have gone before me, and also ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to be here this morning. Of course, I've been to University Mullah Warman some years ago. In fact, I was supposed to travel in person to University Mullah Warman this time around, but due to unforeseen circumstances, I have to come on on the webinar mode as well. Well, the topic which was given to me to speak is a general topic on contemporary issues in Southeast Asia, especially in the backdrop of the changing world energy dynamics and also other issues with regard to transborder issues and also beyond. Beyond mean can be anything. So while thinking about this topic, I thought of narrowing down to several aspects. One is the energy part of it, number one. Number two, looking at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, number two. Number three, looking at the dynamics within ASEAN, the challenges within ASEAN, poses as a regional organization and also to the region itself. And number four, some impact from the Ukrainian crisis or the Ukrainian war that we are facing at this point of time in Europe. So that is how I plan to present my talk today. Is it okay if you give me control over the slides? I will share because I have a latest slide. I'm not sure you have the control. Okay. Let me just share the slides.
Can you share now?
Yeah,
Dr.
just a second.
All right.
Host disabled participant share sharing.
So, Teams, can you please give Dr. Ravichandran permission to present his slide?
Okay, right. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Can you all see this?
Yes, sure.
All right, okay. Okay. So let me go through the slides. Okay, primarily when we talk about energy issue or energy security or energy insecurity in Southeast Asia, we are also talking about the ability of countries to provide energy, whether it's in the form of non-renewable or renewable energy to the people. But as a region, although we know that countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, and also Vietnam are net exporters of or net producers of energy, especially with regard to petroleum, we find that the other countries are also face a different scenario entirely. If you would look at countries in mainland Southeast Asia, like for example, countries like Laos, I think one of the presenters mentioned about Laos being the battery of Asia, which is very true, because there is a energy scarcity within those countries, especially in Cambodia, in Laos, where until some time ago, several years ago, the rate of rural electrification, meaning which the electricity access to the rural population of Cambodia was only 20%. This was some years ago. But I believe that this number have already increased. But when we look at countries in the greater Mekong River Basin or in the lower Mekong River Basin, one of the issue is energy. Why? This is one of the reasons that many countries along the Mekong River Basin have invested heavily on building of the hydropower dams. Okay, and this dam building has created major issues and starts not only in the upper riparian of Myanmar, of Laos, but also in China. All right. As there is a lot of damming activities or dam building activities in China, and also along the mainstream and also the tributaries, right? The tributaries of the Mekong River. Okay, there are so many. In fact, one of the important economic revenue of Laos is actually selling of electricity to China and also to Thailand. So energy dynamics differs from one country to another from the region. Malaysia have very different energy dynamics and energy mix compared to other countries in the region as well. But overall, I think there is a energy scarcity, right? There is a greater energy demand, and it is said that in Southeast Asia, energy demand have grown very high, about 60% over the last 15 years, all right, and is forecasted to grow by another 2/3 by 2040. Why is this? Because of the economies are growing. And basically when you have greater industrialization and mechanization, and that requires the use of a lot of energy as well. And all these industries are powered by energy, whether it is electricity or from renewable sources and also by non-renewable sources. And this has to do with the rise in population. All right, population demands the use of more energy, all right, for our own needs, our households, and that is also expected to improve. To increase, all right, as the number of population grows by another 150 million people. Right now, we are 630 million people in Southeast Asia. With that, there is also other external dynamics, all right? With the oil import increasing, Southeast Asia is expected to register a net deficit of energy trade over 300 billion. All right, there is also the deficit in terms of energy trade by countries which are selling and also importing energy, in this case, more of petrol or oil and gas sources. So this is the scenario that we are facing at this point of time. And this scenario is exacerbated by the dynamics that has emerged as a result of the Ukrainian conflict. Okay, this is, so that is the general dynamics. If I were to show you, sorry. And this is the figure which I've got to you, which I've shown you in this slide also shows, the energy insecurity issues, all right? Then if you were to look at, these are the countries, okay? Indonesia, okay, this oil production in the region is forecasted to decline, okay? By 2040, that is also, Indonesia is also forecasted net producers of oil, Malaysia as well, and most of the countries. But in total, there is a gradual decline, the forecasted of gradual decline of oil production in the region. And all these countries in Southeast Asia are greatly dependent on the oil and gas, right? Like, for example, transportation industry is solely dependent on the petroleum sources, okay? And of course, many of the industrial, in Malaysia, many of these industrial manufacturing facilities have switched from petrol to gas, okay, and by the incentives given by the government, as early as in the 1980s. But I'm not sure what is the situation in other ASEAN countries. But the dependency on oil and gas is increasing as we increase our industrialization and manufacturing capabilities as a result of the increase in population. So the other dynamics, especially when we talk about energy security, all right. And when we talk about energy security in Southeast Asia is the Mekong River dynamics. I've also mentioned earlier on the Mekong River is very important, and it's very unique when we talk about energy insecurity, because this goes hand in hand with also water security related issues. All right. Not only the dam building activities, but also the element of hydropolitics between the upper and the lower riparian countries, especially China. China is controlling the taps of the Mekong River. We have the Mekong River Commission, which is in place to discuss regional dynamics of the river management. But also we have another parallel, organization, the Mekong Lanchang Initiative, all right, which is supported, or rather, which is led by China, which have some parallel or maybe overlapping interests with regard to the management of the Mekong River. A lot of issues with regard to the Mekong River. Those who are studying Mekong River, they can tell you that whenever there is a drought, less water flows into China, reduces the water, diverts the water to their own province or regions. That has caused a lot of reduction in terms of water. And this reduction creates a lot of ecosystem issues, and also issues of desalination because of seawater going into the plains in the delta, the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. Vice versa, during the rainfall, more water is released and there is flooding. Okay, so these are one of the dynamics, but of course there is a lot of issues with regard to the livelihood of people as well to the ecosystem in the region. Dam building, yes, in one of my research visits to Laos, I met the Vice Minister of Energy in Laos, and we were talking quite intensely about the problems of ecosystem degradation. And he said that, hey, look here, I have also the environment impact assessment report now from other international agencies to say that, the dam building that we are doing has very least, or rather very less environmental damage, right? So there is a lot of dynamics to it, a political involvement to decision-making with regard to building of dams. Of course, China and Thailand, they are quite happy to tap on the energy potential of the Mekong, all right? And also other countries as well, including Vietnam and also Cambodia, are also interested to build. In fact, a Malaysian company also have built one of the dams, all right? I'm not mistaken, it's the Don Sahong dam in Vietnam. The other one is coal dependency. Many of the power plant or the power generation plant in many parts of the world, including in Malaysia, are coal dependent. Okay, so there will be an impact in terms of the demand of coal dependency as well. And well, coal dependency or coal power plant has also its own negative impact in terms of carbon footprint. The other issue when we talk about energy is the investment on renewable energy. I think all countries in Southeast Asia have their renewable energy projection and plan as well. I can tell you something about the Malaysia's RE or renewable energy objectives. We were supposed to have reached about 5% of dependency. That means from our energy mix, 5% should be from renewable energy, which I don't think they have reached the target. Okay. While one of the reasons is the other source of energy are still cheaper than the RE sources. When we talk about issues of like, for example, using solar energy and solar panel and all that. In fact, there is a lot of development into the R&D of the solar panel at this point of time, and they have made it much cheaper. But having said that, the initial cost of installation, this was told to me by one of the specialists in the solar energy. The initial cost of installation of the solar panel in your house, and the investment on the batteries and whatnot, will take the investment is about 20 to 25 years of your energy bill, future energy bill. That means, you are paying upfront. Okay, say your energy bill is about $50 a month, all right? Then you're talking about $600 sorry, 100, but how much is that? 12 months is 600. Okay, $600. So you're actually paying 600 times 3. That's times 30, sorry, times 30. 30 years of energy bill upfront. All right, in order for you to invest on the infrastructure of a solar panel and the batteries and whatnot, and of course the service part of it as well included. So it appears at this point of time, while there are a lot of initiatives into renewable energy, whether it's biomass, whether it's solar or other forms of renewable energy, but in terms of how do you say, the cost benefit. All right, the cost benefit of it, it appears that the renewable energy is still more expensive. Of course, the other form will be nuclear energy. There was in Malaysia, there was this initiative for a nuclear energy some time ago, but the government abandoned that initiative because there was a negative impact on that proposal. Especially there was also a public outcry on the issues of security with regard to energy power plant. All right. So I think these are some of the issues that in terms of energy that all the ASEAN countries are facing at this point of time. Okay. Well, of course, the future of energy is renewable energy. Okay. And initially we all need to to accept the idea that we will eventually have to pay slightly more than the conventional energy that we are using now, because renewable energy is actually slightly more expensive than the conventional energy that we are using. Okay, so I think that is the point on energy. Let me just go on to another point, which is one of the major challenges that we face at the moment is actually in the pandemic area. Some say that we are already in the post-pandemic, but I don't think so. We are in the process of living with the pandemic. We call it the endemic period. Okay. I don't think the virus is going to leave anytime soon. Hopefully it stays like this. It stays malign, stays subdued. Yeah, I hope there is no new variant that we cannot manage. Then we'll be in a bad shape. Okay, but the last 2.5 years has been a game changer, has been a turning point in history. There are several turning points in history. You can say it's World War I, although World War I was pretty much confined to the European scenario. World War II, 9/11. These are major changes, major events that changed the trajectory of international relations and geopolitics over the world. And I think the COVID-19 is one of that such event that created a massive change, a massive change in international relations in all aspects of human endeavor. All right. I think this something that we need to look at, because in terms of devastation, now we are looking more specifically into non-traditional security, especially in this health pandemic, as a major issue that we need to deal with, in addition to the other traditional security that countries are facing. So this is some of the statistics. There are more than 11 million people in ASEAN. I'm not talking this. The world statistic is much more, but in Southeast Asia, it's about more than 10 million people have perished. Okay, the death is about 500,000 people. Okay, rate of confirmed cases per 100,000 population is about 1,677 person. All right, so it's quite high actually. All right. So this pandemic has impacted all aspects of our life, all right? Businesses impacted due to lockdown. Now many people have lost their jobs, despite in addition to the health issues, all right? In the initial part when people were infected and dying like ants, the travel and tourism industry is probably one of the most impacted. The airlines were impacted. The travel, whether it's land, sea, and air travel, all were impacted. The hotels were impacted. People involved in the travel and tourism business were and some of the business perished, right? So this is one of the problems that we have. All the sectors were impacted, but in different degrees, and also loss of job. So I think this is one of the major issues that ASEAN countries have to embrace, is how to come out from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think many countries have put in place many action plans in order to revive their economy. Right, Malaysia, in fact, were badly affected. Our economy were affected, but I think slowly we are coming back. All right. So this is this will be a long and tedious and a painful process for the next couple of years. Okay, that's one. That's the second point. The third point, that I think one of the major problems that we will face, we have been facing for some time, and we will continue to face, is actually how to deal with China. China has moved, when China joined the WTO many years ago, there was a lot of this concern about how China behave. Will they be a fearsome dragon? Will they be a cuddly panda? All this we were talking about at that point of time. And in fact, people in the United States and Europe, they have come up with this particular perspective. They call it the China threat theory. Right, the fear of China. All right, but China initially, when they joined the international system, they were very accommodative. They joined all the international multilateral system to assuage the fear of the world. But over the years, they have moved from being a a team player to becoming more assertive, and now showing signs of aggression, becoming more aggressive. And we have seen that in their claims over the South China Sea, right? In their claims over the South China Sea, and their refusal to accept UNCLOS as the mode of conflict resolution mechanism, okay? Their claims are historical, but we know that historical claims can be anything and everything. I can claim, India can claim the whole of Southeast Asia if they want to, if it is on historical terms. The inability to engage China refuses to embrace itself, or to confine itself to a code of conduct. We already had the ASEAN Declaration of Conduct many years ago, I think nearly 15 years back, but we are still unable to bring China to agree to a particular standard or a code with regard to their engagement with South China Sea. And over the years, we have seen that South China Sea has been extremely militarized. They have several islands that they occupy, and they are building islands actually. And at least three of the islands have been fully militarized. So this has created a lot of problems with regard to the sovereignty issue of the South China Sea. Of course, China under UNCLOS will definitely have no claims because their 200 nautical mile, doesn't come into spread lease, So of course they under UNCLOS they cannot claim, right? Even they draw a map from the Hainan Island, it cannot reach 200 nautical miles. We're definitely more than that. So I think this is some of the problem. And now we see that slowly the other bigger powers are playing a greater role. The United States seems to be welcomed by the ASEAN countries, all right, quote unquote welcome, because of their proposal of this idea of freedom of navigation, challenge China in South China Sea, all right. So I think the power politics dynamics is also coming. And I also foresee that this idea of Chinese aggressiveness will be there, primarily because of two incidents or two elements. One is the strongman politics of Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping has become an eminent leader and without any challenge. So therefore, I think this big power, strongman politics will be there to make China strong, to appear to be, powerful. And the other point is what happened, in Ukraine, and realization now that any kind of invasion to any countries, the other countries are not going to come in forcefully in order to stop that invasion. And we have seen in the United States and what European Union are doing. So this may send a wrong signal for China with regard to their endeavor in the South China Sea or even Taiwan, okay? So these are some of the fear that's lingering around. I've been approached, I've been asked about these issues by the media. Okay, so we find that, the power politics have also returned to a greater extent, I would say, in the South China Sea as well. So that is one of the other challenge that we are looking at. Of course, there are also other challenges with regard to Southeast Asia and ASEAN. Border disputes are there, okay? As long as you have a border, you will have some level of dispute. Whether it is a continental land border, whether it's a maritime or the ADIZ or the air border, all right? Everybody will have some kind of issue when it comes to border, and border management is extremely important. I know that Malaysia and Indonesia also have a lot of border issues because we have common border in Indonesia, like for example, and the last meeting when I came to Mullah Warman many years ago, one of the issues was on border management as well. So border management will be there in the foreseeable future, and it has to be managed. And I think Malaysia is also getting a bit jittery, especially when Jakarta, the capital, is going to be moved to Kalimantan. So there is a lot of also some level of apprehension in Malaysia with regard to what that will entail to the border management. All right, will there be more people entering Malaysia? Or maybe there'll be less people entering Malaysia illegally, all right? So I think these are some of the issues that the Malaysian security people are discussing at this point of time. Illegal immigration happens everywhere, all right? Malaysia especially, we have, in addition to Indonesian illegal immigrant that we have a lot of, Indonesians here legally as well as many illegally as well. We also have illegal immigrant from countries like Rohingya, okay? And so Malaysia appears to be a favorite country for people in the region to come. Okay, despite that illegal immigration and immigration issues, the other element that we need to look at is the ethno-religious issues. Now, I see that there is a hike in the ethno-religious, especially religious issue, which is combined with ethnicity in many parts in archipelagic as well as mainland Southeast Asia. This has to do with the rise of the Abrahamic traditions or the Abrahamic religion in this part of the world, all right? And also in reflection to what's happening externally, all right? What's happening in other countries, which has a ramification or upheaval in the Southeast Asian countries. I think this is one of the things that we need to address very carefully. The reason is many of the Southeast Asian countries are multi-ethnic countries. Indonesia is also very much multi-ethnic, like Malaysia, Indonesia, and to a small extent, maybe Brunei. I'm not sure what is the population of the non-MIV in Brunei, Melayu Islam. Of course, everybody has the similar baraja, right? Okay. Then, of course, issues surrounding, I already mentioned this about the Mekong River dynamics as well. Okay. The other challenges that the region faces are basically issues of corruption and lack of good governance. We find that in some countries, the major corruption cases are taking place. Capitalism has overruled or rather override the social justice concern in many countries, right? People are getting extremely richer. The conglomerate, the big entities are getting, they are actually calling the shots and controlling the governments. Malaysia is also, we have many issues now with corruptions as well, major corruptions, all right? We have also seen demographic changes with regard to the rise of younger population. What does that mean to what do you call that, to that demographics and also the socioeconomic life of a nation, and also uneven social development. A lot of disparities at this point of time being highlighted because the rise of the civil society movement. In the last 20 years or 15 years or 20 years, very rarely we talk about the idea of social justice. But in the last 15 years now, social justice and the role of the civil societies is becoming extremely important, right? Not only in Malaysia, I've seen it very much in Malaysia, but also in other Southeast Asian countries, maybe not so in Myanmar. Disparities in economic development and technology adoption, yes, that's true. Between countries and also between regions, this happens. Technology adoption in terms of internet penetration is also differs from one country to the other. But I think it will catch up, all right? It will catch up. Even in countries like Cambodia and Laos, this handphone culture is already there, right? So eventually it will catch up. Environmental degradation is an overwhelming issue that confronts the region, not only the region, but also the world. And also, each country will have their own agenda in order to adopt to the sustainable development goals. I think these are some of the issues that ASEAN face in the near and the foreseeable future. Maybe one slide, very, very briefly, I would like to tell you about this Ukrainian war and how it impacts Southeast Asia. So basically, one of the just look at the rate, because I want to finish. I think my time is up, I think. All right. So last 2 minutes. All right. Russian invasion, essentially, when we talk about it, challenges what we call the new world, the world order that we had. All right. Founded the idea of the sovereignty of states. All right. Integrity of states, the right of states to for its own self-determination, which is well enshrined in the UN Charter. And this has been infringed in the Ukrainian war. Of course, no matter how, to my mind, as an academic, I would say that, whatever excuse or reasons given by Russia, it is not enough for them to have a physical invasion, right? A bloody invasion of a sovereign country. All right, so this is one of the problems. What is it to Southeast Asia? Basically, I think all countries will take an equidistant approach because Russia is important to us, the United States, Europe, is also important to us. So therefore, we will continue this equal distance approach with regards to this conflict. Okay. Now, what does it imply? Basically, whatever problem that Russia is facing will have a trigger effect in terms of the global supply chain, and also will impact or already impacting Southeast Asia. Energy and food prices have dramatically increased. But ASEAN renewable target. ASEAN has also a renewable energy target that is of 23% by the year 2025, another 3 years, another 2 years. It's also impacted by the supply of stock of critical mineral. Nickel and palladium is used for batteries, all right? So whenever you have renewable energy, like for example, your hybrid cars or solar panel, and now you need to invest on the long shelf life batteries. So that will be, but it's also in a flip side, maybe it can also promote to ASEAN what we call decarbonization. All right, and right now we are in an energy issue, so therefore countries will look at other ways, to supplement this energy and to look at other forms of energy and also decarbonization. Okay, the other thing is Russia has been the largest exporter of arms to Southeast Asia. All right, many countries have purchased arms, but over the years after the Crimean War, in 2014, we found that the purchases have come down. Primarily is because of the quality of weaponry from Russia, and also the better quality products that we can buy from other countries as well. So there are a lot of ramifications if Russia becomes more dependent on China for economic and military assistance. If that happens, then there will be an impact to Vietnam, all right? Because Vietnam buys their weapons actually from Moscow, and they may, there will be a ramification to this, a reduction of sales, possibly a reduction of sales in offensive weaponry to Vietnam. Malaysia also have military deals, weapon asset purchase deals with Russia. Will that be an impact? Maybe. If there is, then probably countries can also outsource or rather source from other sources from around the region. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Okay, thank you. Then we will talk further during the Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Murthy. Just to sum up presentation from Dr. Ravichandran Murthy. So begins with the energy security in Southeast Asia, from energy deficit, issues like in Mekong River, dam building, our coal dependency, Southeast Asian dependency to coal is a issues that must be tackled by the region. And lastly, the same solution is the investment on renewable energy. But then investment in renewable energy is not quite simple because it spends a lot of pennies, dollars. It's not cheap. Then energy source, which is quite hard because it challenged the international regimes of NPT and sort of like it's not a simple way to create a new source of energy as well as a public revision to the creation or to the nuclear energy. He moved to COVID-19 as a game changer in global politics, a very profound game changer in international politics. Like World War I or World War II was confined within Europe or within the great powers only, but then the global pandemic affects many countries, not many, but all of the countries except North Korea probably. Moving to South China Sea disputes, and it's a challenge to Southeast Asia. It challenges to Southeast Asia as well, and the implication of Russo-Ukraine war to Southeast Asia, especially speaking the energy and fuels scarcity that has dramatically increased by the effect of Russo-Ukraine. So thank you again, Dr. Ravichandran Murthy. So we move to Q&A session. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participant, we are moving to last session, which is Q&A. So I'm going to open 3 questions limited for 3 persons. Each person raise 1 question. So this is very limited a opportunity. So please be concise with your question. If you have, raise your hands and I will give you an opportunity to speak up just for 1 question only and be concise. So I open for 3 questions. Any one of you have a questions? So before I open the Q&A session, just to let you know that the questions should be addressed for our international guests, which are Dr. Ravichandran Murthy and Ms. Sekpor. Unfortunately, Dr. Mikdar Rusdi has left the conference because he has another seminar, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So we continue with our 2 international guests. If you have questions to Dr. Ravichandran Murthy or Ms. Sekpor, please raise your hand. 1 question and concise. First, Ronaria, please. Yes. No. Okay. Please.
Thank you for the opportunity. I wanna ask to Ms. Poor. So, is the big transformation in Southeast Asia, especially in energy security, to control the distribution of energy supply and access throughout the world. It was mentioned, and we know that there are still many challenges in energy security in Southeast Asia. So, in your opinion, do you need a policy to control and resolve this issue? Thank you.
Ronaria, could you please repeat your last question?
So, in your opinion, do you need a policy to control and resolve this issue?
Do we need a policy to resolve the transformation of energy issues? If I'm not mistaken, right? Thank you, Ronaria. Okay, thank you, Ronaria. Sorry, excuse me, would you please mute yourself? It's echoing in my microphone. Sorry. Thank you. Do we need a policy? Right. I'm gonna give it to Ms. Sekpor, but let me finish with the other 2 questions. Right. So probably we have same questions or other questions that relate to each other. So the second question, is there anyone to ask? Please raise your hands. Anyone? Or could we proceed with the first question? Right. Waiting for you. If you have any questions, let me proceed with the first question first. From Ronaria. Thank you for giving a short chat. How is the big transformation in Southeast Asia, especially in energy security, to control the distribution of energy? The question is, in your opinion, Ms. Sekpor, do we need a policy to control and resolve these issues, the issue of distribution of energy supply in Southeast Asia? I think Ms. Sekpor, you could give explanation to these questions, please.
Okay, so I think the question is about if we need a policy to control and resolve this issue.
Yeah.
I think we will say yes, we certainly need a policy, but what type of policies depends on which specific issue of energy security we are addressing. For example, whether it's about the access of like reliable access to energy supply, or is it about trying to expand the energy access to rural area, for example. So for sure, yes, the policy is needed at both national level and also international, regional level, we would say. But which type of policy would depends on which aspects of energy security we want to address. For example, if it's about energy access to rural area in a country, then it would be in the hand of the government to suggest a policy. For example, building infrastructure to connect the urban area to rural area, for example, or inviting private partnership to invest in that infrastructure to lessen the burden of the government in expanding or building all the infrastructure. Then it would most likely depends on in the hand of the national governments. Though for sure there will be there can be potentials of international cooperation in that ways. But if we look at the regional for example, if we can also say South China Sea is related to energy resources aspect of issue, if you want to draw it in that way. So it means that if it's about energy access, energy resource access in South China Sea area, for example, then it would require regional discussion, regional management, or a discussion on how those resources should be managed or should be distributed to all those nations, given the contentious dispute happening in South China Sea. Then it would require international discussion on that. So that would be my answer. Yes.
Yeah. So just do a quick expansion to this question. So the policy you mean is it similar to government intervention in your solution slide, Ms. Sekpor?
So I would say in my slide, I specify government intervention in a short terms, addressing the issue of the living of the people in post-pandemic issue. But yes, you can also say that this kind of my answer is also related to government intervention. So government will continue to play an important role in addressing all those both national and regional discussion on the issue. I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sekpor. Thank you, Ronario, for your question. And this second question from Muhammad Irfan. Muhammad Irfan, is there any Muhammad Irfan here? Do you want to speak directly to Dr. Ravi Chandran, or shall I read it for you? Well, I assume I should read now. to Dr. Ravi Chandran. Which country in Southeast Asia are most at risk from climate change, considering the issue of energy becomes very important? Which countries in Southeast Asia are at stakes from climate change? Dr. Ravi Chandran, are you there? Could you please give explanation to these questions, please?
Okay, thank you for the question. Which country, primarily the country which are ill-prepared to address the issues of climate change, number one. Number two is the groups, countries where there are a lot of vulnerable groups, all right? The groups which are impacted by climate change, especially those people who are in the agriculture sector, those people who are living along the river basin, and people who are dependent for their livelihood in around the river basin. And this also includes people who are also dependent on sources of income from not only the river, but also the seas. You see? So I think these are the countries which are quite ill prepared to manage the impact on their vulnerable, population at greater risk. And I think there is a German company, a German think tank, environmental think tank, did a global survey some time ago. And it is called, if I'm not mistaken, it is the Global Climate Change Index. They will not be 100% accurate, but based on their analysis, they said that in Southeast Asia, countries like Vietnam, countries like the Philippines, or even Thailand, and also Myanmar, at a greater risk of environmental impact due to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. So yeah, as Dr. Ravi mentioned in his presentations, countries in Mekong River are at stake, like Vietnam, due to the climate change. Thank you for your explanation, Dr. Ravi. Last question from Herdi, please. Sorry, Herdi, your voice is sorry. Your microphone is
test.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. My question to Dr. Ravi Chandra. Previously, you said that Southeast Asia very depends on coal. What in the next year depends of coal can be lost and replaced with renewable energy. And according to you, what the renewable energy is suitable to invest to Southeast Asia?
Herdi, what is your first question? Could you please repeat?
Next few years, can Southeast Asia replace the coal? And what the renewable energy stable to invest to Southeast Asia?
Okay. Thank you, Herdi. So I'm going to give to Dr. Ravi Chandran opportunities to explain the answer. First is what is renewable energy suitable for Southeast Asian and that was the second question, and the first one is
the first was on coal dependency.
Yeah. Is it possible for us to escape? Yeah.
There is a saying in when you talk about the energy dynamics that coal is power. Coal is king. All right. Coal is king in Southeast Asia. The reason being is most, I'm not sure the percentage, but I know a large percentage of power generation in Southeast Asia is generated by coal plant, meaning which power generation plant fueled by coal, all right? Arang batu, we call it, right? All right. So coal plant is there, all right? But one of the major issues of the coal plant is what we call, it is not a clean energy, all right? Now the general trend at the moment is actually for the power plants to go on a system called CDM, Clean Development Mechanism. The Clean Development Mechanism is a system that you use in order to ensure that any power plant, whether it is a coal plant or or other kind of a plant, that reduces their carbon footprint. And if you were to compare, of course, hydropower plant, when they cut down the forests and they clean up the valleys and they divert the river, and that will probably have a much bigger carbon footprint compared to the coal plant, because coal plant is more, more controllable in that sense. But I think it is not a form of a clean energy. All right. So in order for them to go in a form of a clean energy, they need to go through the CDM mechanism, which means they have to invest in a machinery, in systems, in procurement, and also in terms of manufacturing, taking out the coal as well as the power plant system itself, to follow a system which is what we call, very green friendly, or rather more greener, that uses a greener environment, what do you call that, processes. And that costs a lot of money, all right? And that costs a lot of money. So therefore, not all the power plant, that uses the CDM mechanism as well. There must be a lot of incentives by the government given to the independent power producers, right? Not all is by the government. There are many also, this what do you call that, power plants are actually by what we call the independent power producers. It's a private sector company. So I think this awareness must be there pretty much. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, what is the alternative? RE is no, it is very easy to say that is an alternative, but actually we need to change our lifestyle. This energy use is lifestyle, right? We never ask where does the energy that comes from, that comes into our house. When we switch on, when I switch on like that now, and I switch off the lights, all right, we are not bothered, all right? But in some countries, they have actually bothered. They want to know what is the source of this energy. Is it from a renewable energy? It is from a non-renewable energy. So what is the carbon footprint, all right, of the energy which I'm using? So I think this comes with awareness by the public. You know, they need to be aware. They need to think, hey, I need to be careful with this type of energy. Okay, that's number one. And the second one is for us to change our consumption pattern. Because one of the problems of the world and one of the major problems with regard to power usage is our consumption pattern, all right? We need to reduce our consumption. One car is enough. Are we investing on in hybrid cars, or are we still on the petroleum, gasoline, Volvos and Mercedes, all right? So I think these are steps that you take in. The answer to your question is not very simple in that way. You can have power plant, Indonesia, it's a tropical country. So therefore you have a lot of sunlight. Okay, invest on power plant. But in the same time, if you don't change your way of your consumption pattern, so therefore any kind of other types of renewable energy is not going to solve the energy issue and climate change issue as well. Okay. So I think that the problem is more systemic. And also more of values and lifestyle choices that we make as human beings.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Apichandran. So it's not about what alternatives like solar panel or hydro system, but rather about how we change our habits, the consumption habits, the lifestyle. It is more essential than what alternatives should we have in Southeast Asia. The first question is about the whole energy, and also in Indonesia. I think a few days ago, I also read news mentioning that Indonesia still depends on coal energy for electricity up until 2035. So yes, as Dr. Rafichandran said, that it's still a king for energy. It's not simple to substitute coal to another energy alternative. So for Dr. Rafichandran Murthy, thank you, and Ms. Sekpor, again, thank you for your contribution to our seminar today. Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I would like to close this session and hand in to Master of Ceremony. Thank you once again. See you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
MC?
you.
Excuse me.
Okay. Check.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you for the discussions, and to our speakers, also to Mr. Randi as our moderator today. To close this seminar, we would like to thank again the speakers, the moderator, the Vice Dean, and the head of the department, and also the audiences today for the attendance, for the knowledge, and the participation in today's seminar. Let us end this event by saying grace to our Lord and God, or any other entities that we believe in. And to end this seminar, I would give the control to the operator to formally close and end the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. Thank you, Ms. Paul.
Terima kasih Mbak Unis, terima kasih semua. Ini yang presentasi, yang sudah present, silahkan untuk mengisi link presensi yang sudah dibagikan oleh panitia. Terima kasih semua.
Terima kasih. Thank you so much, Bu Rahmadania, and all the committee. Thank you, students. Thank you, Dr. Efrizal from Riau.
Ya, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Dari Universitas Riau, Riau ini Sumatera. Terima kasih banyak, Pak Bung.
Ya, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. See you again in the next event. We leave now.